Why do we cling so desperately to the image of a woman we ourselves invented? Why are most conversations about women either naive adoration or bitter complaint? Where is the raw honesty, the kind that strips away the masks? Today's culture loves to exalt women as symbols of moral purity, empathy, inner light. She's the mother, the muse, the soul's guardian. But who decided this was the truth? What if this belief isn't real, but a socially convenient mirage, not created by women, but by men? What if women aren't angels, but tacticians, not helpless, but co-authors in the endless dance of influence? Friedrich Nietzsche was one of the few who dared to ask this. He didn't hate women, he simply refused to see them through the lens of fantasy. While other philosophers either worshipped or dismissed women, Nietzsche chose neither. He wanted to uncover not what women pretend to be or what men want them to be, but what they truly are beneath centuries of social expectations and romantic ideals. He wasn't the first to sense this. Look at Lord Byron. In his verses, a woman is not saint or sinner, but something more haunting, elusive, intoxicating, and dangerous. Or take Napoleon, who once said, "Women rule us even when we rule them." The great ones understood her strength isn't in what is seen, but in what is hidden. Nietzsche wrote that men don't fall in love with women. They fall in love with an image, a projection, a comforting fantasy that inspires them and makes them feel heroic. And the more idealized the woman, the safer the man feels. But this isn't admiration, it's denial. It's easier for a man to adore than to understand. Easier to say, women are light, than to acknowledge their strategic instincts, their emotional precision, their silent mastery of influence. He fears this, not because it is evil, but because it is real. To idealize a woman is not to love her. It is to flee from her essence. It is to turn away from the storm of her authenticity and replace it with a porcelain doll. But when that mask breaks, when the real woman emerges, the man feels betrayed. Not because she changed, but because the illusion collapsed. And when the fantasy fails, the man cannot face his own blindness. He says she became different. He grows resentful, cold, cruel, but deep inside, he knows the failure was never hers. It was his inability to meet reality without flinching. Nietzsche didn't write this with malice. He wrote it with urgency. He saw how mass idealization robbed women of freedom and men of maturity. In this cycle, both suffer. One plays the savior, the other the one needing salvation, but no one is truly alive. Take Tolstoy, for example. His Anna Karenina is not just a story of passion, but of unmet illusions. The men in her life don't see her, they see what they want to see. And when she steps outside the frame, they collapse, or condemn her, or vanish. Nietzsche believed that as long as a man seeks a reflection in a woman, he cannot love her. As long as he craves a perfect version, he is afraid of who she is. As long as he asks her to comfort him, he is lying to her and to himself. And here lies the central insight. Seeing a woman clearly demands courage, because she isn't a poem, she is will. She is intelligence buried beneath centuries of cultivated sweetness. She is power no one dared to name. This is not a critique of women, nor is it praise of men. It's a diagnosis of a civilization addicted to illusions, and anyone who tries to break free from it will first feel fear. But after fear comes something far greater, clarity. And so the question remains, do you love a woman, or are you just hiding behind a story about her? If a man asserts dominance by raising his voice, a woman conquers with a whisper. If he builds a throne, she subtly turns it toward the door she chooses. This is not weakness, it is mastery of a higher order. The most powerful force is often the one that remains unseen. Throughout history, men were given the titles, the armies, the crowns, but who whispered to these rulers at night? who inspired, redirected, or quietly dismantled their ambitions while they believed they held all the control? Look at Cleopatra. No sword made her dangerous, her mind did. Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, the greatest men of their time, couldn't resist her. She never led legions, but her name became synonymous with power. Or take Josephine, Napoleon's wife. He confessed that without her, his fortune seemed to abandon him. She didn't lead battles, but she held his internal compass. What is that, if not influence? Nietzsche saw something profound in this. He wrote that for centuries, women were denied access to overt power, and so they refined something far more subtle, intuition and strategy, while men mastered the loud methods, speech, force, law. Women moved in the shadows, a glance, a pause, a silence. They observed, adapted, learned to sway events without ever pushing. This is where their strength lies, not in being visible, but in being undeniable. A woman doesn't command, she shapes the emotional weather around you. She doesn't demand loyalty. She creates a space where a man feels compelled to give it. This is not weakness, it's art. And Nietzsche respected it more than brute control. He believed that female power was never an accident. It was adaptation. Society barred women from authority, so they built their own form of dominance, emotional, symbolic, relational. They didn't want to be above men. They wanted to survive among them. And to Nietzsche, this made them not weaker, but more sophisticated. And that sophistication terrified those who couldn't see it. That's why men often feel they're losing control around a woman, not because she overpowers them, but because she never acts directly. He can't pinpoint when he began playing by her rules. One day he wakes up and realizes the decision has already been made and he thinks it was his. This bewilders him. He calls it feminine charm, mystique, or witchcraft, anything to avoid the truth. He was outmaneuvered gently and precisely, and here the myth of the idealized woman returns as a defense. It's easier for men to believe that women are delicate and dependent. It preserves the illusion of control, but the truth is often the opposite. Beneath that softness lies a mind sharpened by survival. A woman doesn't beg, she creates options. She doesn't threaten, she disappears. She doesn't argue, she shifts the balance without raising her voice. And the irony? Society calls this feminine nature, wisdom, virtue. But what it really is, Nietzsche argued, is an intuitive survival system, born from generations of having no formal power. Women weren't born like this, they became this, because they had to. Nietzsche saw a duality here. On one hand, he deeply admired this psychological precision. On the other, he warned, never underestimate what you can't see. Precisely because this kind of strength is invisible, it is more effective. It doesn't confront, it bypasses, and in that it holds a kind of silent superiority. A woman, he wrote, learned to win not by fighting, but by tuning the atmosphere, by reading desire, guiding it, and rewriting the script, a script the man doesn't even realize he's in. This isn't manipulation in a petty sense. It's a refined understanding of human nature, forged by necessity. So when someone says a woman doesn't decide anything, Nietzsche, if he were listening, would smirk, because the one who influences the decider is the one who truly decides. And women, in this regard, are masters. What if love isn't a union of souls, but a rehearsed performance where no one plays themselves, only the role most likely to attract and keep the other? What if men and women aren't seeking understanding, but simply trying to appear valuable, essential, irreplaceable? Nietzsche claimed love is not peace. It is a battlefield, not in the sense of physical conflict, but as a clash of instincts, where both sides wear masks, conceal motives, and fight not for affection, but for influence. And the more we romanticize love, the more tightly those masks cling to our faces. He wrote that men do not love women, they love the idea of women. They fall for the promise of salvation, for a projection of their ideals. The woman becomes his comfort, his dream, his meaning, but in all of this, she is not herself. Women, on the other hand, rarely experience love as pure poetry. For them, it is an intuitive strategy, a means of survival, of finding stability and leverage in a world that offers neither freely. This difference is fundamental. A man falls for illusion, a woman for opportunity. He wants to believe. She wants to endure, not out of greed, but out of instinct. Look at the intellectual romance between Simone de Beauvoir and Jean-Paul Sartre. Their bond was deep, complex, built on ideas and revelations, but behind their freedom lay a constant negotiation for emotional territory. No one was just themselves. They wore masks, managed each other, and sought dominance under the banner of openness. Or take Marilyn Monroe and Arthur Miller. He yearned for depth, she for acceptance. He saw an ideal, she saw utility. Their roles never aligned, and so the love unraveled. Nietzsche saw this pattern. He believed men and women rarely desire each other as they truly are. They want versions of each other that soothe their fears, answer their needs, feed their ego. A man seeks in a woman comfort from the world's chaos. A woman seeks in a man protection from vulnerability, and when they fall in love, they sign an unspoken contract. You'll be who I need you to be, and I'll be what you want to see. This creates the most dangerous kind of relationship, not between people, but between mutual illusions. Each clings to the role because they fear that if they show their real self, they'll be rejected. Nietzsche saw the tragedy in this. He didn't blame anyone. He simply described the structure. Love, he believed, was not acceptance, but a temporary truce between two tacticians. And the longer that truce lasts, the more it costs to break. Because when one person finally removes the mask, the other feels betrayed, not by the change, but by the loss of illusion. Here's the real danger. People who are only loved when they perform a role become terrified of being seen as they are, because authenticity is risk, it's vulnerability, it's surrendering control. So the mask hardens, the relationship becomes theater, and true understanding becomes impossible. But Nietzsche was no cynic. He believed that freedom is possible, but it begins not with the search for the perfect partner, but with the abandonment of roles. When a man stops seeking salvation through a woman, when a woman stops using love as a guarantee of safety, when both admit, I don't know you, but I'm willing to see and to be seen. That's not romance, that's revolution. Can we really trust that morality is always rooted in goodness? Or is it perhaps a tool, one that learned over time how to look noble? Nietzsche asked a provocative, almost blasphemous question. What if morality isn't truth, but a strategy to control what cannot be conquered directly? When it came to women, he was particularly cautious of society's language around feminine virtue. For centuries, women were labeled with traits like humility, patience, self-sacrifice. These were celebrated as signs of moral superiority, but Nietzsche didn't see purity, he saw strategy. He claimed that women don't follow morality for its own sake, they follow it because it works. In a world where physical strength and formal authority belonged to men, morality became both a shield and a sword for women. Instead of fighting openly, women began rewriting the rules. They learned how to moralize weakness, to make it a kind of power. What was once vulnerability became a symbol of depth. What once limited them became something that demanded respect. Take Joan of Arc, a young girl who picked up a sword in the name of a divine mission. She wasn't sainted only for her courage, but because she cloaked her actions in moral and religious virtue. Her power was accepted because she presented it in the language of higher values. Or look at Maria Theresa, empress, mother of 16, and an image of traditional womanhood. Yet behind that image was the cold, strategic mind of a political architect. On the surface, feminine, ideal; beneath, ruler of an empire. Nietzsche observed the woman forced to exist within a system not built for her, learned to influence that system from within. Morality became her dialect of control. The more society praised certain traits, the faster she adopted their appearance, not as essence, but as a way to create room for maneuver. He emphasized this wasn't hypocrisy, it was adaptation. The woman isn't fake, she's conditioned. She doesn't lie, she plays by rules that would otherwise leave her powerless. For Nietzsche, morality is never neutral. It's either the shield of the weak or the justification of the strong. In the female domain, it becomes a subtle tool to turn vulnerability into advantage. If she can't pressure, she evokes guilt. If she can't command, she persuades through values. If she can't demand, she appeals to conscience, and it works. For generations, men have praised women's wisdom, often without realizing that beneath this wisdom lies a highly developed survival mechanism. The woman learns to speak in the language of morality, not to provoke fear, but to inspire reverence. She doesn't seize power, she wraps it in a form that no one dares to challenge. Nietzsche warned, the subtler the power, the harder it is to detect. A woman who embraces you with a smile may be more dangerous than a man with a sword. Because she doesn't create conflict, she redefines its logic. She acts without confrontation, but gets what she wants. Not because she is manipulative, but because she was trained to survive this way. He saw greatness in this, but also danger. Because when morality becomes a weapon, truth and appearance blur. Everything seems beautiful. But beneath the surface, there is calculation. Not malicious, just necessary. And here Nietzsche was brutally honest. Morality is not always a mirror of the soul. Sometimes it's just clothing, and no one wears that style better than a woman. What happens when a woman no longer needs protection? When she no longer requires someone else's income, societal approval, or validation through family? What happens when she discards the mask of weakness and reveals the face of strength? And most importantly, how will a man feel when his illusion of indispensability disappears? Nietzsche foresaw this more than a century ago. He wrote, "Female strength had been underestimated, not because it didn't exist, but because it was hidden." But what happens when it is no longer hidden? He didn't rejoice nor condemn. He warned. He knew that true female independence would destroy the old order, not because the woman is bad, but because the man isn't ready. He's been taught to feel like the center, the one around whom everything revolves. But now he's faced with a reality where he is no longer needed as the support, and this causes not respect, but resentment, not admiration, but confusion. Nietzsche understood. When a woman becomes self-sufficient, not every man can remain balanced because he will have to redefine himself. If he once built his self-worth on control, now he must build it on inner value without the need for domination. He didn't think this was bad, he thought it was painful. Like any form of growing up, a woman, freed from dependency, stops playing a role. She becomes direct, simple. She doesn't embrace to manipulate. She doesn't stay silent to control. She just is. No excuses, no fear, no need to please. And now, when the masks are removed, there's only one real question left. What remains between a man and a woman when you strip away fear, dependency, strategy, and theater? Nietzsche knew 2 equal players remain. Not the same, but equal in their darkness, their strength, their willingness to look at each other without illusion. It's a rare state, almost impossible, but real for those who've walked through illusions and stood tall. This is not a reconciliation of the sexes. It's not the end of conflict. It's the beginning of a new level, when a man and a woman see each other not as saviors or threats, but as reflections of what needs to be worked on within themselves. To get there, much must be let go. The man must release his claim to power. The woman must release her strategy of moral submission. Both must discard their masks. Only then does what Nietzsche called mutual becoming emerge. When you stand side by side, not because you fear being alone, but because you choose to stand together, consciously, soberly, without illusions. He knew most would never reach this. This is not a path for the masses, but it exists. And it starts with one thing: honesty, with yourself, with the one beside you, with life. Stop playing ideal roles. It's time to be real. If you've made it this far, you're one of the few who are ready to face the truth. Do you agree with Nietzsche's view on relationships? Support this project, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with those who are also ready for uncomfortable but real conversations. Here we don't give comfort, we give clarity. See you in the next episodes.